Good evening, everyone. Hope you are having a wonderful evening. If you're out there, thanks for joining in. I just wonder, I don't know if anybody's really logged on yet. I wonder if anybody keeps score when they look at those questions. So if you kept score as you went through those questions at the beginning, let me know how many you got right and let me know how many you got wrong. Maybe earlier than some people have jumped on here. We're a little bit early. Kind of have a hard time getting the timing right on all of this and when we get started. So anyway, glad that you are here. Glad that you are joining us tonight, and glad that you are just glad that you're joining in this this study of incredible women of the Bible. There's some really incredible women that we're looking at as we go through the text. And tonight we have the chance to talk about Huldah. Huldah is probably a little, maybe not as well known as some other ladies, incredible ladies in the Bible, but she's an interesting study, and we're going to take some time tonight to go through that and just kind of look at her story and where she fits in history. If you were in the Second Kings study, you've already gotten kind of a brief introduction to Huldah. We covered Huldah when we went through Second Kings, and I believe she is in, let me check real quick, Second Kings 22 is where you'll find the story about Huldah, Second Kings 22 or Second Chronicles 34. So anyway, looking forward to having that study, looking forward to going through that. If you have questions that you want to submit, throw those into the chat box on Facebook, or you can throw those in the chat box on the website. Be monitoring all of those. So if you have something you want to say, throw it in there. If you have a question, if neither one of those works, my phone is right here. Just send me a text, and I'll get it that way. So if you need a way to contact, or if you have a question, something you want to say, just send that to me. Be happy to respond to that. So Huldah, incredible women of the Bible. I want to give a little bit of a background of what is happening when Huldah comes onto the scene. Huldah is, she's at the time of Josiah, who is king. If you look at, I'll put the text on the screen for you. Second King. I'm going to read from actually the Second Chronicles passage. So I'm in Second Chronicles chapter 34. If you want to get a Bible and follow along, or you can just follow along right there on the screen. I'll keep the Bible text up there for you when we talk about it. So Josiah becomes king, and he is 8 years old when he becomes king. And I know that's really young, isn't it? I mean, it's almost we can't hardly think about an 8-year-old becoming king. Can you imagine if the upcoming presidential election we had one candidate who was 8 years old, and that 8-year-old was running for president? I mean, that's not the way kings worked, but it would just be kind of interesting if that happens. Hey, so somebody said got 14 questions right. I don't even know how many questions were on that intro, but excellent if you get 14 right. So Josiah is 8 years old when he becomes king, and he's going to be king for 31 years. And the kings before Josiah have not been good kings. And Josiah comes and he does, the text is really interesting. He does right in the sight of the Lord. He walks in the way of his father David. He doesn't turn aside to the right or to the left. He is a righteous king. And in the 8th year of his reign, so if he started when he was 8 years old, the 8th year of his reign, he would have been 16 years old. And it says when he was 16 years old, it says while he was still a youth, he began to seek the God of his father David. And in the 12th year, he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem of the high places, the Asherim, the carved images, and the molten images. So he becomes king when he's 8. He turns his heart to God. He begins to seek God when he's 16. When he's 20, he begins to purge Judah and Jerusalem of the carved images, and they tear down the Baals and the incense altars, and he does all of those things as he's turning the nation back to God. And in verse 8, in the 18th year of his reign, after he's purged the land, so he's 26 years old now, he sent Shaphan the son of Azaliah and Maaseiah the official of the city, and Joah the son of Joahaz, the recorder, to repair the house of his God. So they are going to repair the temple. So Josiah is deliver. He gives the money to Hilkiah, the high priest, and Hilkiah is going to deliver the money to be brought into the house of God to the Levites, the doorkeepers that had collected this money from Manasseh and Ephraim, from the remnant of Israel, from Judah and Benjamin, all of the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and they gave it into the hands of the workmen. So the workmen are working in the house of God to restore it. So they're giving it to, I'm just kind of summarizing this, they're giving it to the carpenters and the people who work with quarried stones and the timbers and the beams for the houses. And they're working and restoring this house. And while they're bringing out the money, which had been brought into the house of the Lord, Hilkiah, the priest, found the book of the law of the Lord, which was given by Moses. And that's very interesting to me, because you think through all of these kings, and a lot of them were bad kings in the sense that they were not righteous. Where has this book been? This book has been lost all of that time. So there's this period of time that the book of the law that God gave to Moses has been lost. And Shaphan brings the book. Hilkiah brings the book out. He gives it to Shaphan the scribe. Tells him, hey, I found the book of the Lord. And Hilkiah, so he gives the book to Shaphan. Shaphan brings the book to King Josiah and reported, the word of the king, everything that was entrusted to your servants they're doing. They've emptied the money out, which was found in the house of the Lord. They delivered it in the hands of the supervisors and the workmen. And Shaphan the scribe told the king, saying, Hilkiah the priest gave me a book. I mean, just can you imagine? I just wonder what that would have looked like. And Shaphan read from it in the presence of the king. And when the king heard the words of the law, he tore his clothes. I mean, he's repentant. And he commands Hilkiah and Achiam, the son of Shaphan, Abdon, the son of Micah, Shaphan the scribe, Asaiah, the king's servant. And this is his words. He said, go inquire of the Lord for me and for those who are left in Israel and in Judah concerning the words of the book which has been found. For great is the wrath of the Lord which is poured out on us, because our fathers have not observed the word to do all that is written in this book. So I wanted you to get that scene. I wanted you to see what was happening with that. So they have found the book of the law. Josiah has read it. He understands, hey, we haven't kept the book. We have not done, our fathers haven't kept the book. God is angry with us, and he is asking for a word from God. And so he sends those men to go inquire of God and ask what they should do to get a message from God. And you would think, so this is not kind of the stage I'm setting for you. This is not an unimportant word that Josiah is looking for. Josiah understands this is a really serious thing that has happened. And so they go out to find a word from God. Now let me switch slides for you. So we're in 2 Chronicles 34, 2 Kings 22. If you want to read those passages later tonight and kind of see what's going on with there. It's Josiah's 18th year. So he's 26 years old, and he is looking for this message that he needs from God. And so he goes, sorry, I didn't mean to swap that slide yet. He goes to Huldah, who is a prophetess. So we're going to read, I'm going to read from 2 Chronicles chapter 34, starting with verse 22. So Hilkiah and those whom the king had told went to Huldah, the prophetess, the wife of Shallum, the son of Kokhath, the son of Hashrah, the keeper of the wardrobe. Now she lived in Jerusalem in the second quarter, and they spoke to her regarding this. Now, one thing before we get too far in the text, Huldah is not the keeper of the wardrobe. Her husband, Shallum, is the keeper of the wardrobe. So it's about Huldah, but she's not the keeper of the wardrobe. And she said to them, Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, tell the man who sent you to me, thus says the Lord, behold, I am bringing evil on this place and on its inhabitants, even all the curses written in the book which they have read in the presence of the king of Judah, because they have forsaken me and have burned incense to other gods, that they might provoke me to anger with all the works of their hands. Therefore my wrath will be poured out on this place, and it shall not be quenched. But to the king of Judah, who sent you to inquire of the Lord, thus you will say to him, thus says the Lord God of Israel regarding the words which you have heard. Because your heart was tender, and you humbled yourself before God when you heard his words against this place and against its inhabitants, and because you humbled yourself before me, tore your clothes, and wept before me, truly I have heard you, declares the Lord. Behold, I will gather you to your fathers, and you shall be gathered to your grave in peace, so your eyes will not see all the evil which I bring on this place and on its inhabitants. And they brought the word back to the king. Now, there's a couple of really interesting things in those passages, and we'll go through those one by one as we go through. But I just want to bring out some things about Huldah before we jump into some of those things that's in the text. So here's the first thing that comes up when we talk about Huldah. The question almost instantly is, why did they go to Huldah? She's not mentioned anywhere else in the text. There's no record of her prophecy before or after this. There is this one instance in Scripture, and Huldah, the prophetess, is the one who speaks. Now, I've read some really interesting things about Huldah, and I want to cover some of those. It's not as if Huldah is the only one who is a prophet or a prophetess in Jerusalem, in Judah at that time. There are two other prophets who are contemporary to Huldah, and they're really, I mean, they're kind of big name prophets. I mean, these are the kind of prophets who have a book, right? So, I mean, if you're a prophet and you got a book in the text, that means you're a pretty big prophet. And Zephaniah and Jeremiah both are prophets about the same time that Huldah is a prophetess. So the question I instantly ask is, why did they go to Huldah? I mean, why didn't they go to Zephaniah, or why didn't they go to Jeremiah? And before we answer that question, I just want to look at Zephaniah and Jeremiah for just a second to look at some things about them. So this is Zephaniah chapter 1, verse 1. The word of the Lord, which came to Zephaniah, the son of Cushi, the son of Gedaliah, the son of Amariah, the son of Hezekiah, in the days of Josiah, son of Ammon, king of Judah. Now, I know that's a lot of names. I mean, we just put a lot of things like into a really small space right there, right? But here's what I want you to think about, because I read this, and it could be true, but as I looked at it, I'm not sure that it is. I want to explain. The question is, was Josiah, who is the grandson of Hezekiah, and Zephaniah, who is a great-grandson of a man named Hezekiah, are they relatives? And some people think that they are relatives, and maybe they are, but I have my doubts. I just want to tell you why I have my doubts. So Josiah is the great-grandson of Hezekiah, because there was Hezekiah and Manasseh, who is king, and Ammon, and then Josiah. So all four of those individuals were king: Hezekiah, Manasseh, Ammon, and Josiah. So if you read back through 2nd Chronicles or 2nd Kings, you'll see that. So Josiah is about 57 years after Hezekiah. And so when we look at Zephaniah, you have a Hezekiah in there, right? You have Hezekiah, son of Amariah, son of Gedaliah, the son of Cushi. So could they have been connected? Now, I know Hezekiah is in the name of both of those. When Hezekiah died, his oldest son, Manasseh, became king. And when Manasseh became king, he was 12 years old. So that means he would, at the time of his ascension, which would have been like 697, roughly, he would have been, so he would have been born somewhere around 709. So 697 and 12 years, that would be 709. So he was born somewhere around 709. So if he was the oldest son, Manasseh, and he became king, and Amariah was also a son of Hezekiah, he would have had to be younger. Do you follow me with that? So he couldn't have been born, if Amariah was the son of Hezekiah the king, he couldn't have been born before, say, 708 BC. So you have, if he's born in 708, then you have Gedaliah, Cushi, and then Zephaniah. So if you think 25 years between each one of those, or, you could, even if you go, if it's 25 years between each of those, by the time you get to Zephaniah, he wouldn't have been born before Josiah became king. Now, if each one of those had a son when they were 20 years old, which would have been pretty young, but if they each had a son when they were 20 years old, and you only figured 20 years between those generations, then he would have only been like 9 years old at the beginning of Josiah's reign. And he doesn't seem to be a child. He seems to be older. So Josiah was king from 641 to 609. So it doesn't seem to me that there's enough time for him to be a descendant of King Hezekiah. I think it was another Hezekiah. I don't think this Hezekiah was king. So I don't really think they were related. I don't know if you followed that. I probably didn't explain that really well, but maybe you did. If you didn't have any, if you got questions about that, throw them in the chat box. I'll try to cover that again. But the point of that is, I don't think that if Zephaniah was a descendant of King Hezekiah, there would have been enough time for him to be a prophet by the time Josiah became king. So I don't think that they were related. But that doesn't take away from the fact that Zephaniah, during the reign of Josiah, was a pretty prominent prophet. And it seems, if you look at the prophecies of Zephaniah, they're probably, they almost have to be before the revival of 621 BC, when Josiah, after this prophecy of Huldah, he is going to turn the nation to God. There's going to be this huge revival and this turning to the Lord God, and getting away from, he's already getting away of the idols and the Asherah poles, and he's tearing down the high places. And now, after finding this book of the law, he is going to turn the hearts of the people to following the law that God gave to Moses. And that was a big revival that happened about 621 BC. And Zephaniah, if you go back and read his prophecies, they're about how Israel needs to, Judah needs to repent and return to God. And so with all of that, it seems like the message of Zephaniah had to be before the revival of 621. So Zephaniah is most likely, he's early in Josiah's reign, but that doesn't mean that he's not around when the book of the law is found, and that Josiah could not have gone to Zephaniah. Now, some write that, well, the problem with that is Zephaniah wasn't in Jerusalem. But there's no way in the text to tell that. The way Zephaniah talks about Jerusalem, he says this city, it's almost like he's a resident there. But even if he were a resident somewhere else, I mean, there's no, to say that they went to Huldah because there wasn't another prophet in the city, the text never says that. So I don't want to say something that the text never says. So after that, you get to Jeremiah. And I mean, Jeremiah is a great prophet, right? I mean, Jeremiah is the kind of guy that you go to when you want to have a message from God. And Jeremiah began in Josiah's 13th year. And if you look over, let's just open a Bible program really quickly. Well, I may have put this on a slide. No, I did not. So if we go to Jeremiah chapter 1, I hope you guys have a Bible and you just grab a Bible and you kind of follow along when we do that. When we do this, you just don't rely on the one that I have on the screen. But Jeremiah chapter 1, the words of Jeremiah, the son of Hilkiah of the priest, who were in Anath in the land of Benjamin, to whom the word of the Lord came in the days of Josiah, the son of Ammon, the king of Judah, in the 13th year of his reign. So in the 13th year of his reign is when Jeremiah begins this prophecy. So he is, and Jeremiah is interesting. He's the son of Hilkiah, right? And Hilkiah is in this. Hilkiah is the priest. So it's kind of interesting that Hilkiah doesn't go to Jeremiah, but he doesn't. He goes to Huldah instead. So he would have lived in the city of Anathoth, which is it's in the land of Benjamin, and it's just right outside of Jerusalem. We really haven't decided exactly where it is, but there are a couple of places that I think the city might have been located, but in either one of those, it's within 2 to 3 miles of Jerusalem. So it's not very far outside the city. If you wanted to have a message from God and the prophet was only 2 to 3 miles away, I mean, even round trip, that's 4 to 6, right? You would send for him and you would bring him in. And Anathoth is really interesting. Jeremiah owns a field there. It's interesting, some of his fiercest opposition when he as a prophet comes from the people of Anathoth. And after the Babylonian exile, some of the people from that city were one of the first ones to return to Judah. You find that out in Ezra chapter 3. And so, but it's fairly close to Jerusalem. And when you look at that, you wonder, why did they not go to Jeremiah? And I can't answer those questions. I mean, I don't know why they didn't go to Zephaniah if he was still around. I don't know why they didn't go to Jeremiah, although Jeremiah is obviously, he's a prophet of the time. We know that for sure. But they didn't go to either one of those. They went to Huldah. And they went to Huldah to find out this message that's from God. And she is going to deliver that message, and she does deliver that message to the king. And I think there's just a couple of really interesting things about Huldah. I mean, we'll just look at them and then we'll come back. Let me make sure I didn't skip anything I wanted to talk about here. All right, so first, it seems as if Huldah had this, I call it a clear connection with God. I mean, it's not like she hesitated when she was asked the question. It's not as if she was trying to find a word from God. It was something that she was, I mean, everything in the text seems like it was something that she was very accustomed to doing. It did say she lived in the second quarter, and this is kind of an aside. I should have covered that. That's probably the new area of Jerusalem, the second quarter, a new part of the city that was being built. Some have surmised that she lived there with some of the ladies who worked inside the temple, who were keepers of the temple, and maybe she prophesied to them. Never says that in the text, but you'll read that quite often. But she has this connection. She is able to pretty clearly explain the message that's going to come from God. I mean, she is able to very quickly say, you know, you've burned incense to other gods, and you've forsaken me, and my wrath is burned against you. So she's just very accustomed to giving this kind of message, it seems. There's another thing that I think is like really interesting, and she has a really, she speaks clearly and boldly to the king. There is this phrase that she uses, and I think this is just so, I think it's so cool, and I think there's a really interesting lesson that comes from this that we need to remember. When she addresses the men who were sent to her, and they're going to take the message back to the king, and I want you to look at this in the text. she said to them, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, tell the man who sent you to me." Tell the man who sent you to me. Who is the man who had sent them to inquire of God? And he's a righteous man, right? But who is the man? The man is the king. The king. But God doesn't address him. She said, tell the man who sent you to me. And I think there is this great and lesson. And I don't want to pull too much out of the text. I don't want to make too much out of this, but I do think it makes a point. When it came to the law of God that had been found, the law of Moses, the instruction of God that God had given to the people, there wasn't a difference between the king and what would have been considered the least man in the kingdom. He wasn't special because he was the king. When you're supposed to keep God's law, you're supposed to keep God's law. The king is just like everyone else. And there is a great lesson in there. It goes back to statements where it says like there's no favoritism with God. So a king who is at the very top of the political spectrum in his world, he is just as responsible to keep the law as the least man in the kingdom, or what they would consider to be the least man in the kingdom. And isn't it interesting when you think about that and you reflect back to words about Jesus, that the least will be the greatest, and the greatest will be the least, and the first will be last, and the last will be first. It doesn't have anything to do with social structure. It only has to do with turning your heart to God and keeping God's instruction and God's laws. You just tell the man, right? So whether it's a political structure, even a financial structure, right? You see this especially in the book of Luke. If you read the Gospel of Luke, there is this reversal of fortune, this struggling to find the right words for you, but it's this switch of idea. The rich who are looked up to, they are the ones who are oppressing the poor. And in the teachings of Luke, they're the ones who are going to find the wrath of God. The poor who are being oppressed and taken advantage of, they are going to be the ones who are called righteous and the ones who get God's blessing. So even when you look at the financial structure, you can't serve two masters. You can't serve both God and money. And it's hard for the rich to enter the kingdom. All of those types of verses that you find from Jesus. When you get to a financial sector, it doesn't matter if you have tons and tons of money or you have very little money. With regard to the law of God, you're both exactly the same. The same thing with religious. You look at I'm pushing this over into the ministry of Jesus. Why did Jesus say that the prostitutes and tax collectors are getting into the kingdom before the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the teachers of the law? It's not that you are recognized as righteous, it's that you are righteous. Why is it that he calls a tax collector? And why is it that he has these words, the woe to the Pharisees and the scribes who appear to be religious, but inside they're full of dead bones and they're whitewashed tombs. So when you look at the world and the world says, well, this is a religious community, or this group is more religious than another group, with regard to the law of God, everyone is seen in the same lens. Whether it's race or gender or age, it doesn't matter where it is. And I think it's just so interesting. You tell the man who sent you. He's not special because he's a king. He is obligated to keep the law just like everybody else. And now later he addresses him as the king of Judah. And again, I don't want to make too much of that point, but I do want you to understand that with God, the thing that God is concerned about is not how the world sees you. God is concerned with what's in your heart and how you turn to him and how you seek him and how you desire to be his servant. Because there's no favoritism with God. And in addition to that, Huldah, it seems as if she's exhibited this deep concern for God's people. I mean, she understands they've forsaken. They've burned incense to other gods. God's wrath burns against them. Um, it's just she seems to have this. It's grieved her that her ancestors and her king and everyone around her no longer cares about the promises of this covenant. And you wonder how long was, and I should have researched this, how long was the book lost, and how is it that Huldah knew some things about it? It was because of her connection to God and her deep concern for God's people. It reminds me of verses where Micah says something like, "I saw Israel scattered on the mountains like a sheep without a shepherd," and I think maybe Huldah had that same picture in her mind. So as we we should seek those sheep that are in our pasture, those people that we have influence over, to keep them close to God. And God called, he called Abraham out to demonstrate his love to the world, and he wanted them to be a light to the world, and that was their mission. But they became distracted and they failed. And I think that's what Huldah sees with her people. They've become distracted and they failed, and they haven't followed the law of God, and they've gotten away from the mission that God has called them to. And she is giving this prophecy from God to try to get them back on the right path and on the path that they need to be on. Now, here's the other thing that this is a shorter lesson, but I really like this. She proclaims this incredibly impactful message. I mean, she says, "Okay, you are going to experience the wrath of God because you have turned to other gods, and my wrath burns against the place, and it's not going to be quenched." But to the king of Judah, there's this lesson here about the king of Judah. And verse 18, I'm going to get myself on the other side of the screen. "But to the king of Judah, he sent you to inquire of the Lord, thus you shall say to him regarding the words which you have heard. Because," now here's great lessons in these, "because your heart was tender, and you humbled yourself before the Lord when you heard what I spoke against this place and against its inhabitants, that they should become a desolation and cursed, and you have torn your clothes and wept before me. I truly have heard you, declares the Lord." To humble yourself before God, to seek God, to make God most important, to humble your heart. It reminds me of the words of that Michael came and told Daniel. From "Don't be afraid, Daniel, for the first day that you've humbled yourself and you've sought understanding. From the first day you've sought understanding, to humble your heart before God, your words have been heard, and I have come in response to them." And if make today, I'm going to write a blog post about this. Make today the first day that you humble your heart before God and you seek understanding, if you haven't done that already. He says to Josiah, "But because you humbled yourself before the Lord, because you understood, because you turned to God and you let God be God, and you humble yourself before God and you bow down before his throne." So if you haven't humbled yourself before God, then let today be the first day that you humble yourself before God. So she proclaims this impactful message, and Josiah goes out in chapter 23. Josiah goes out and he gathers all of the men of Judah, all the inhabitants of Jerusalem, all the priests and the prophets and all the people, and it says the small and the great, right? He gets everybody together and he reads in their hearing the words of the book of the covenant, which they found in the house of the Lord. And he stands by the pillar and he makes this covenant to walk with God, to keep his commandments, his testimonies, his statutes with all his heart and with all his soul, and to carry out the words of the covenant that are written in the book. And the people entered into the covenant. So that's another great lesson. Enter into this covenant with God. Make that same pledge to walk after the Lord, to keep his commandments, his testimonies, and not just to keep them, but to keep them with all of your heart and all of your soul, and carry out the words that are written in God's book. So Josiah, he gathers everybody together. They enter into this covenant, and then he starts what we usually call just the reforms of Josiah. He takes all the vessels that are made to Baal and Asherah. He burns them outside of Jerusalem in the cities. He does away with all of the idolatrous priests, because these kings of Judah had appointed them to burn incense in the high places and the areas around Jerusalem, and they burned incense to Baal and to the sun and to the host of heaven. He brings the Asherah. They put this Asherah pole in the temple, in the house of the Lord, and he takes it outside and he burns it and he grinds it to dust and he throws it onto the graves of the common people. He breaks down, all of the high places, and he gets rid of all of the cult prostitutes, and he brings the priest from the high places that burned incense, and he doesn't let them go up to the altar of the Lord, but he just completely cleanses the city, the nation, from all kind of idol worship and all of the things that have turned their hearts away from God. The altars that are at different places in the city and on the roof, some even on the roof of the temple, he destroys those, and he tears those down. The altar that was at Bethel, that Jeroboam had made way back, when he said, "Don't follow the sins of the king Jeroboam," he tears down that altar. He demolishes the stones, and he does all of these things to turn their hearts back to God. And he does that because this message that Huldah has given is this impactful message telling them to renew themselves and turn themselves to God. He predicted disaster, and Huldah predicted disaster because she was the prophetess of God. She only spoke the words that God gave her to speak. But when she speaks that message, people listen and they hear it and they respond to it. And I think that's just a great, there's some great lessons right there with Huldah and the things that she is doing and the things that she accomplishes. So that's really all I have to say about Huldah. I think that is, hope you learned something from that, and hope you learned something from that lesson. I was trying to make sure that wasn't a text that somebody sent to me with a question, and it is not. So I hope you learned something from that. I'm not going to talk 45 minutes like I usually do on Wednesday night. Next week, we are going to look at Priscilla and Lydia. So if you want to kind of jump ahead and see where we're going, you can go to the New Testament. We'll be jumping out of the Old Testament into the New Testament. Be talking about Priscilla and Lydia, who are two incredibly great women in the New Testament. This study will go through, I think it'll go through the end of October. I've checked that before, but I'm pretty sure that's right. If you don't have a place to be on Sunday morning and you do not have a church to worship with, or if your church is not meeting, we will meet here at Clarksville Highway at 9 o'clock for Bible class, 10 o'clock for worship, 5444 Highway 41A, Joelton, Tennessee. If you cannot be here in person, we'd love to see you in person. We know a lot of people aren't getting out yet. We understand that, but if you can't be here in person, you don't have a church to attend, or your church is not live streaming, please go to either ClarksvilleHighwayChurch.com or GospelChariot.church, and you can tune into the live stream there, or you can find us on those couple of Facebook pages, Clarksville Highway Church of Christ, Gospel Chariot, or there is a YouTube channel called Gospel Chariot, and you can find us there as well. This Sunday, we are doing this series on asking for a friend. These are questions that, those kind of questions that you ask for a friend. I have a friend who would like to know. And the question this week is, do we have guardian angels? So looking forward to talking about that. The week after that is what happens when we die. But this week, we will be studying guardian angels and trying to answer the question, do we have guardian angels? So hopefully you can tune in for that Sunday morning. Also, we will be streaming Bible class at 9 o'clock on Sunday morning, and we will be looking this Sunday morning at love for family. If you don't have anything to do on Tuesdays at 10 o'clock in the morning, 10 a.m., I am doing an Old Testament chronology class. It's very informal, about 7 or 8 people on there. We get on a Zoom call, talk back and forth, ask some questions, say hi to each other. If you want to be a part of that, you can go to gospelchariot.church. You can go to that website and you can sign up. You'll see a box there for Old Testament chronology. Just click on that box and sign up. So if you'd like to be in that class on Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock, really enjoying that class. Probably go 2 or 3 more weeks, and then we might actually do New Testament chronology after that. So if you'd like to join in on that class, just jump on to gospelchariot.church. Sign up for that. You'll get an email with a Zoom link where you can Zoom into that class. And again, if you don't have a place to be Sunday morning, please join us either live or live stream, 9 o'clock for Bible class, 10 o'clock for worship. Hope you have enjoyed being with us tonight. And let's see, Linda Lipscomb, usually the king would summon people to him, wondering why not here. That is a good question, Linda. I thought about that, and I have no idea why he sent people to Huldah instead of having Huldah come to him. And I'm going to look back really quickly, and I want to see something. Lost book. So he did not. He just told them to go inquire of the Lord for me and the people and all Judah concerning the words. He didn't tell them who to go to. So Hilkiah went to Huldah. But that's an interesting question. I have no idea. Hey, that's why I love it when you throw stuff in chat boxes, because I don't, most of the time I don't know how to answer it. But I like the question, so I don't know. So I'll answer it that way. I have no idea why the king didn't have her come to him, but he did not. He told them to go find the message. They went to Huldah. But anyway, good question. All right. Hope you have a great evening, and look forward to seeing you again soon. So I am going to sign off.